It is the end of January, and that means pruning season needs to wrap up. Today is mulberries. Hello everyone, this is Dwayne with Edge of Nowhere Farm, and we're coming to you here. It's the end of January 2022. If you guys have been following us along, you know that we've been building this farm from scratch. We now have trees that are 2 years old or younger, and what we're talking about today is how we are pruning our black Pakistan mulberries for the first time. Now, we have talked about mulberry pruning before, and I'm gonna go ahead and link our pruning series here, and if you wanna go back and check out some of those older episodes, you can see how we've been pruning, in some cases, some older mulberries. However, today we're going to be pruning a couple of black Pakistan mulberries that have only been in the ground for a year. More on the tree itself and how we're going to prune it, but before we do, I want to share with you the tools that we're going to be using today in order to get this done. First things first would be safety. I have gloves on. We're dealing with sharp implements here, so I want to make sure I'm not slicing and dicing my fingers here in the middle of pruning season. Second thing would be eye protection. These are just some basic safety glasses. You can wear sunglasses, whatever the case may be, but definitely wear something to protect the eyes. We learned the hard way by getting hit in the face with small branches like this. Not a fun day. My go-to pair of pruners is these Corona bypass pruners. We've talked about this before, but bypass basically means that the blade side here bypasses the anvil when you're making the cut. We've just found that that makes a very, very clean cut, especially on fruit trees. It's extremely important to make sure that you're not damaging the leftover material on the tree. Next thing today would be bypass loppers. Same action here as the Corona pruners. For any larger branches that we need to take off of the tree, I'm fond of this Corona folding saw. This is the Corona RS7265, but honestly, any folding saw would be just fine for getting the job done. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about this tree and what kind of technique we're going to use on this tree today. So for reference, we're here at the back of the farm. The farmhouse is right at the front. We have 8 mulberry trees that are lined across the back of the property. So the goal with these trees with 30-foot spacing on center is to have nice massive trees and green as the backdrop to the farm. Now you can see from the 1 year's worth of growth on this black Pakistan mulberry, this tree was the size of my pinky and probably about that tall. So tall and skinny, and you can see what this has turned into. At the base of the trunk, we have probably a 2 to 3 inch around trunk. And as far as height, I'm probably pushing about 10 feet at the top of the tree. And I'm guessing that we're probably a good 5 to 6 feet across. Again, in a tree that is 1 year old, from a pinky in size to this tree is pretty impressive. Now, black Pakistan mulberries do grow very aggressively for us here in Arizona. As far as the pruning technique on this tree, as with all other mulberries, it's really kind of a free-for-all. You can prune these as an open center. You can prune them like a hedge. In fact, we'll show you a couple different options as far as pruning your mulberries. What we're doing with this one is we're actually going to be encouraging some upward and outward growth. So the key back here with this backdrop, again, is very tall, wide trees. These trees will get 30, 40, or 50 feet wide and just as tall, and that's exactly what we want. So in what we're doing today, we're gonna be encouraging that growth. First thing that we wanna do is just know what we want the tree to look like when we're done. We know that we need to have at least a few feet worth of trunk at the bottom, which is going to support that larger tree. We also want to make sure that we have plenty of room underneath the tree for livestock to come through. We do have the possibility of having goats, sheep, and possibly some cattle coming through here. We'll have to protect the trunk itself, but don't mind if they're munching on some of the branches. They will do that with mulberries. But the first thing is just the overall shape. We know we're gonna have that trunk again higher up off the ground, so I'll be taking material off the ground. And no matter what you do with your mulberries, you're always looking at branches that are facing down. You'll want to remove those, especially if they're going to be touching the ground, and then any branches that are crossing. So while I know that I'm going to be focused on that for this year, I'm going to be basically taking all of the material from the base of the tree up to about a 3 to 4 foot level. No matter how you design your mulberry trees, you want to make sure you're removing any branches that will be crossing. Remember, these trees grow very aggressively, especially for us here in Arizona, in an ideal climate for them. Realize that these branches that are only 1/2 inch in diameter today, they're going to be the size of this trunk by the time we get into this time next year. These two are way too close together in order for that to happen, and we don't want to be damaging branches during the growing season. So I have the main scaffolds basically here. I know I'm definitely high enough up on the tree here. Now I have a couple of options here as far as the rest of the material. I can start directing the tree itself, because wherever you make a cut on a branch, you have these nodes that will grow out from just beneath that cut. So if I'm wanting to direct the tree here, I can. I have a pretty good branch here that is obviously pointing towards the west. I have another branch here that is pointing towards the north. I have a branch here that is fairly vertical, but it is basically pointing out essentially what amounts to the east, northeast. And then I have one that's facing directly south. So I think I'm good here as far as these main scaffolds are on this tree, but I have some branches that are doing some things that I don't want. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this branch off here because it's gonna be growing into this area here. And I have some branching here that's gonna basically wind up doing the same. So now another option that you could take with this tree is you could actually leave this particular branch as a central leader. So if you wanted a really, really high trunk, we could very easily cut this tree back to just this single branch. Now, one of the things with mulberries, especially in areas where they grow very aggressively, is you can be quite aggressive with your cuts. You can see there's not much left of this tree. Mulberry is very, very simple and easy to prune. You have a lot of options. Now, we could cut this tree basically composite, which means cut it down to ground level each year. It'll send shoots out every year, 8, 10, 12 feet long. You can utilize those for livestock fodder and things like that. You can also pollard the tree. Very common practice, even here in Arizona, in some of the older areas. They would cut them basically to a couple of arms that were about 6 to 8 feet off the ground, and you cut them back to those arms every single year, and they'll sprout right back out. Remember that your fruiting is going to occur on new branching that occurs from wood that is at least 1 year old. We can get branching anywhere on this tree, and that new branch is where our fruit is going to be. Leaving these scaffold branches on here this year will allow for a lot of branching on the tree, which is where we're going to be getting our fruit. Okay, you get an idea of what this tree looks like. I don't have any obvious crossing branches. I don't have anything that I think is going to impede growth this year, and I have a trunk that is about just the right height for what we're wanting as a backdrop on the farm. Now what I need to do is do the exact same thing on a mulberry tree about 30 feet from here. Again, we're always looking at our scaffolding. I have pretty even balance on the remaining branches so they can continue to grow out. It's probably a little busy in here, but I don't mind having some additional branching that's going to give me some fruit this year, and you can see what the end result is. Now you'll also notice that we have all of our branches in our wheelbarrow here. That's because we're gonna actually be rooting out those cuttings. One of the great parts about mulberries is very, very easy to root cuttings. What I want to show you is another option as far as what you can do, especially if you're focusing on production on your mulberry trees. These are our 4 Shangri-La mulberries that we've already come through and we've pruned ahead of today. These you can see are quite different. In fact, I'm going to give you guys a close-up of how we did the pruning on these trees, focusing on production. Here with this Shangri-La mulberry, you can see I'm down in the middle of the tree. One of the things that we design into all of our production trees is what I call a harvesting notch. That's where I'm at now. I'm on the north side of the tree. You can see very easy for me to get up into here. I have access to all the fruit that will be developing, again, on the branching that occurs from wood that's at least a year old. You can see how we design the scaffolds to make sure we have balance in this tree. A much shorter trunk. We have an open center, which allows me to get in to do harvesting and nice even fruit ripening. And you can see how we have our even scaffolding coming away from the tree. One of the things with the Shangri-La mulberries is they have a tendency to get very top heavy and whippy, and we want to make sure that we're able to balance out the weight as it starts to grow, and of course encouraging some outward growth. But again, you can see the balance in your main scaffold branching. In this case, we have 3 main scaffolds, and then they continue to branch out from there. Here's another one of our mulberry trees. This is a contorted mulberry. You can see the beautiful contorted shape on the branches here. Especially during the winter time, it's just a cool looking tree. Now this tree doesn't give us a lot of production, which is okay. We have these trees here because of the cool look of the tree and a little bit of production at the same time. But you can see we've kept a shorter trunk and sort of a central leader kind of design on the tree itself. And we're gonna keep the tree a little bit shorter. We want it to be nice and wide. One of the other things that happens with these contorted branches is they have a tendency to grow a little too long and they do break on us. So you'll probably be able to make it out. I did bring the size, the overall width of this tree down just to make sure that when we get the nice heavy growth come spring, I don't have branches breaking on this contorted mulberry. So again, something between a production cut and really more than anything, we want this tree to aesthetically look really good. These are our ever-bearing mulberries, and these trees are specifically here and designed so they're gonna make a hedge. What's behind it is our chicken coop and run. You can see we have shade cloth across it now, but our goal is to remove that. We have the western sun that sets this way from where you're at now, and we want to make sure we're keeping our chickens protected from that late afternoon sun that would normally be beating down on them. So what we focused on here was bringing the bottom up so I don't have any issues with not being able to see snakes on the ground. But from there, we've kept them nice and wide. The only other thing is we did take a little bit off the top because again, all we need is shade on this front side. Now these trees, you'll also see we're not as concerned when it comes to crossing branches. This particular variety gives you very, very small fruit. It's extremely productive, but the branching itself is a lot smaller, and we want these canopies from that 2 to 8 foot level to be very, very dense, and we want them growing into each other. So we didn't take any material off of the sides between the trees, and again, we're keeping all of the branching between 2 and about 8 to 10 feet. So hopefully today we gave you an idea of what you can do on some of these younger mulberry trees and giving you some options as far as how you're gonna prune your trees. Whether you're trying to design a privacy hedge or grow a nice, big, beautiful tree as a backdrop, or you have a tree that you really wanna make sure you're focusing on production, you really can get out of a mulberry tree just about anything you want. One of the reasons why we love growing mulberries here on the farm. So just want to thank you for joining us today. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel. We would love to have you here as a subscriber. We cover a lot of things here on the farm that we're establishing, fruit trees being one of our primary focuses, and share the content. If you know anybody that's into this kind of thing, it definitely helps us here when you share it. Any questions or comments, you know those go down in the comment section down below. And our Amazon shop, we'll leave a link down in the description. That is a free, painless way to help support the channel. If you start with the link down below, it doesn't matter what you buy, you help to support us here, and a lot of the tools that you saw today are in that Amazon shop. So just want to thank you for joining us today and remind you, if we can farm on the edge of nowhere, so can you. This is the RS 7625, 7265. I'm getting those mixed up.